Okay, so our next presentation is Emilie Knapp. Emilie is from the University of Liege in Belgium, and the title of the presentation is Trace Element Deficiencies Related to Production or Health Disorders in Belgian Cattle Herds.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I want to talk about trace elements. We know that a lot of studies in the world show the importance of the trace element status on the immune system, on the resolution of the oxidative stress, for example. So in the field, the trace element deficiency is well known to increase the prevalence or to aggravate all types of pathologies like diarrhea, scabies, metritis, mastitis, etc. And nowadays, the problem lives in the very high demand of trace element for our specialized breed. And in Belgium, we use almost only dairy Holstein for the dairy cows and Belgian blue for the beef cows. So that's one of the problems. And despite all the information all the sectors give to the farmer, it is still difficult to have a real status of the cows. In winter, almost every farmer in our land gives minerals and trace element complements. However, the status of the cow is not known, and the distribution, the real quantity, is not known at all. And in the summer, usually, we have no information at all. And the protocol of distribution is very, very hazardous. So the aims of the study was to bring out the trace element status of dairy and beef herds visited for production, reproduction, or health of neonatal troubles from our faculty, regardless of the trace element supplementation, and also to compare the severity of the trace element deficiency between the years, the seasons, and the speculation, and also agricultural region. So in order to do that, from February 2014 until October 2015, the 110 herds which were revisited for production or reproduction or health problems were sampled to obtain the trace element status. In each farm, 7 to 10 animals were collected for the blood, and the sampled animal had to be healthy, so clinically healthy, and we collected 7 to 10 animals per specific group we wanted to check, so heifers, late pregnant cows, or production cows. Just after every visit, all the tubes, serum and plasma, were centrifuged. And we know that inflammation and hemolysis could distort the lab result for the trace elements, so we selected only tubes with no inflammation and no hemolysis. And to decrease the cost of the analyze, we put 1 milliliters per cows in one tube, and we send it to the lab. Our study showed that a pool it still represents the trace element status in one homogeneous group. And we analyzed selenium, zinc, copper, iodine, all the vitamins, haptoglobin to show inflammation again in a private lab. So at the results, you can see here the map of the French region of Belgium, and every farm sample in this study. So we go almost everywhere. We can go everywhere, but almost. So it's quite representative of our region. And what's very important, why I show you this map, is because Belgium is a very little country. However, there are very, very specific agricultural regions. The south here and the east here, you see 80% to 90% of the agricultural surface is grass, is perennial grass. While in the northwest here, it's a region for major crops. So the land quality is quite different, and the diet of the ruminant in this area are very, very different too. So, what about the results, status between the different type of herd? You can see that almost every trace element status, on average, were in the standards, except for the selenium status for both type of farms, and the zinc for the beef herds here. The deficiency of selenium was very, very serious for both type of herds, because the standard is up to 80 microgram per liter, and the average was about 60 for the dairy cows and 58 microgram per liter for the beef herds. You can also see that in all trace element status, the standard deviation here are very, very high. So the variability of the status between the farms were very large. The trace element status was a little better for the dairy cows, but it was only significant for the selenium and for the copper status. So because the variability was very, very large, we wanted to look at the proportion of deficient farms according to the standards. So as expected, the selenium was quite catastrophic, because up to 90% of beef farms were deficient and 70% for the dairy farms. After the selenium, it was the zinc status was quite catastrophic too, with more than 50% of deficient farms. And what was very surprising is that you can see here the proportion of deficient farm for vitamin B12 was very high, because up to 40% of the beef farms was deficient on vitamin B12. What about the between groups of cows in the farm? As expected, because the light management of the heifer and pregnant cows, they had a less good trace element status. Once again, the variability was very, very high for all the trace elements, especially for the iodine, but it was because we analyzed the iodine plasmatic, inorganic plasmatic iodine, and this one is directly linked to the daily ingestion of minerals, and the management of distribution was very, very different between the farms. For the selenium status, pregnant and heifers are the worst and significant status, where their needs are very, very high, so it was quite problematic. And it was the same thing for the vitamin E. So as we looked at the proportion of deficient farms, it was very catastrophic to see that 100% of our heifer groups were deficient in selenium, and quite 90% of late pregnant cows. While we know that the selenium status of the mother of the cows is very important for the colostrum quality and the mortality and the morbidity rate in calves. So pregnant cows, you can see that pregnant cows had usually a less good status, except for the vitamin E. However, it was because our heifer are particularly not good. So as for the vitamin B12, more than 30% of our non-productive cows were deficient. Other results show that there were no significant difference, no correlation between trace elements, and no significant differences between agricultural area, which was quite curious. However, there was a difference between the years, and in 2014, there was a better selenium status, significant, but in 2015, it was the other trace elements were better. There was also a difference between the season, so a better selenium status was found during the spring compared to the autumn, especially probably to the better distribution of mineral during all the winter season. And better vitamin status was found in the summer, and it was quite logical because our dairy and beef farm grazed a lot, so the vitamins must be very good. So as a conclusion, selenium deficiency appears quite important despite all the information we speak along the years, and the deficiency was major in non-productive cows. Likely because these groups are still a little bit forsaken because they cost a lot, but they don't pay a lot. So that's what's quite a problem. And the problem of the selenium status deficiency could be the result of multiple factors, like the higher demand of our breeds, but also combined with the legal limited concentration of selenium in the mineral complements. So farmer had to give 100 and 130 grams per animal to reach recommendation from NRC or INRA about ingestion of selenium. And so with the economic conjunction here, one of the first things they remove to make saving is the mineral complementation. B12 deficiency was very startling and very curious because normally bacteria from the rumen usually synthesize it with the cobalt ingestion. But because it's linked to the activity of the flora in the rumen, it can be linked here to the amount of the dry matter intake, disturb bacterial population, or the variability of the forage quality between area, farms, and years. So, as a conclusion, this study showed that even if we know a lot about trace element status and its impact on pathologies and production, and we talk about it a lot in the field, you have always to check it, the trace element status in farm with production, reproduction, or health problem, even if the farmers say to you, I give them enough, because it's still usually a risk factor in our farms. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Emilie, for a very, very interesting presentation on trace elements. And again, I'm going to open the presentation up to questions from the floor. So again, if you have a question for the presenter, if you'd like to raise your hand. One question that I have, Emilie, is do you find really large numbers of clinical cases associated with selenium deficiency and copper deficiency in either beef or dairy cattle?
Yeah, we have, in beef cows, we have a lot of clinical case in the, about selenium deficiency from the mother, and we have a lot of problem from colostrum, immunity transfer, and cow with myopathy or something like that in our farm. Yeah, we still have it.
Okay. We still have some time for questions from the floor. If we have a question here close to the front. If we could get a microphone, please, close to the front.
Thank you. My name is Lisa. I'm from Sweden. I was wondering, is there any work done, or what your thoughts would be if you looked at a herd without problems? Do you think?
Without problems. We don't go to farm without problems. However, I think the deficiency was quite catastrophic. So I think we had, like the metabolic problems, we had also subclinical deficiency, I think, a lot in our farms. So we looked, and almost a lot of farms we come to visit in February or March. And because I think this is where you have a rupture in February or March when you don't give them enough. And before, you don't have clinical problems, but they are deficient. And after, at the late of the winter, you have clinical problems, so they show with the deficiency.
Okay, we have one more question.
Okay, I'm Mari Niemi from Finland. I'm asking, do you add selenium to your fertilizers in Belgium?
It's existed, but it's quite pricey, so they don't use it. And it's very difficult because the variability of the results in the crops is very. It's not. It's very variable. The results when you put selenium in the ground, and you have to check. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, and thank you, Emilie, again for a very, very interesting presentation.